I wanted to open this video with a console called the TurboGrafx-16. This console had everything going for it. It was one of the first 16-bit consoles released a couple years before the Super Nintendo. It was small, sleek, and it ran on cards instead of big, bulky cartridges. And it had a pretty good launch lineup too, with games like The Legendary Axe and Alien Crush. Everything was in place for the 16-bit console wars to have been between NEC and Nintendo rather than Nintendo and Sega. But there was one major misstep. One jugular-slicing mistake that ultimately killed the console. The game it came with. Keith Courage in Alpha Zones. Keith Courage was a generic, underwhelming platformer that happened to be everybody's first impression of their sleek new console. Though there were definitely other factors that didn't exactly help NEC win the North American market, there was no doubt that Keith Courage was the figurative banana peel next to the rocky cliffside. If they just put in any other game from their launch library, they would have lived to see another day, but they didn't, and it killed them. I feel like that will never be a problem for today's games. For the past 3 generations, there's been the big 3, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. Even though the Wii U flopped, it didn't even come close to leaving a mark on the company. Even though the Xbox One isn't in the best of shape right now, there are still fans of the platform out there that will defend it tirelessly. It's just a simple fact of life for us now. These 3 companies will be there. There won't be a misstep that kills any of them. And you don't need any more evidence of that than looking at Sony's own brand of Keith Courage. The rotting corpse of what once was one of the company's best strengths. The figurehead of what the state of video games looked like when the 8th generation formally began. This is Knack, one of my least favorite games to play, and yet one of the most important ones I will ever talk about. The PS4 launched in North America on November 15th, 2013, with 14 retail titles. Of those 14, just 2 were exclusive to the PS4, Knack and Killzone Shadowfall. While I can't judge Killzone since I've never played it, I know Knack was touted as more of the game to pair with the console. It had a broader age range appeal, and was straight up bundled with the system in Japan. This was the Crash Bandicoot of the PS4, the one kids would open on Christmas morning, the game that would show you why you wanted a PS4. Unfortunately, this was Crash Bandicoot, just unbelievably watered down and none of the charm. A clear textures first, level design later approach to game design. And look, I get it, launch games aren't always going to be Super Mario 64. Corners can be cut and a good game can still come from it. This is supposed to be the first taste, and your appetizer isn't always the loaded baked potato skins. But this isn't chips and salsa either. This is the bowl of crackers kind of appetizer. Big open areas with a few enemies that can all generally be taken down in a few hits. Little to no secrets, just a hallway that goes from start to finish. Pretty, but repetitive environments I wouldn't dare try a single creative design or creative way to traverse it. Creativity is just absent in general. The story goes through tired cliches and pointless diversions just to give excuses to go to more samey, boring places, and they drag it and the game out. And it just goes on and on and on for 10 hours until you feel drained, begging for something to surprise you. Does that sound like what you would want from your new $400 entertainment machine? Does that sound like something you would pay to do for fun? The main selling point in Knack is that your character grows as a result of collecting these ancient relics laying around the world, which is admittedly a nice idea to work off of. The problem comes from the fact that growing and shrinking has very little effect on the gameplay. Enemies still go out in a couple of hits, and they damage you at about the same rate. If it followed through with becoming stronger and weaker via size, the game would have had more to defend itself with, but the theme of not enough haunts the game at every turn. You get elemental power-ups at various set points, but they rarely do anything interesting. The only real secrets to find are gadget pieces, but in order to finish even one of them, you have to play through the game multiple times. It's like they took a single shot glass-sized jar of Play-Doh and they tried to cover a mid-sized sedan with it. There is only one bright spot in the game where Knack has to grow using ice pieces instead of relics, but he has a limited amount of time to get to the goal because he's melting in the sun. It made me sit up a bit in my chair and think, oh, this is actually a pretty creative idea. I hope they follow this up. But the creative moments like that happen very few and very far in between, to the point where the next time I came across an element change, I was too tired to care. I just wanted to be done with the game. But as I recall, this was the only game I had for the PS4 when it launched. I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I could tell Knack where to shove it and go play some Wonderful 101 for the rest of the night, but others probably weren't so lucky. So my condolences to the parents who traded in their Xbox 360s and sold several dozen Wii accessories for the privilege of contemplating their decision when the child goes through the 30th Rocky Cave that week. Knack tries to pad things out with a challenge arena with titles so lovingly named Coliseum Attack Stages 1, 2, and 3, and there's also a time attack mode, but don't let that fool you into thinking that there's any extra content on display. When a chapter select is being touted as extra content, something has definitely gone wrong. Knack was headed up by Mark Cerny, the lead architect of the PS4 itself. He has had his hand in some of the greatest platformers of all time, like Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Crash Bandicoot, so it had every advantage a launch title could have possibly had. The only thing that I can think of that got in the way was probably time, in which case this should be a warning sign to Sony. Do not launch a product before you're good and ready to. Have good, honest-to-God software lined up, have bugs ironed out, and don't ruin your chances just because you want to be there first. First is merely a short-term advantage, one that people won't always fall for. If you keep putting out crappy games at launch that nobody wants to play, eventually people will not want to buy your consoles at launch, and therefore you leave a terrible first impression of the console itself. We shouldn't expect our big tech investments to become worth it in another year or two, but right away, right out of the box. No, the big three aren't going anywhere in the game industry, but if they continue to put out games like that for day one, then one day they will kill the home console industry. Let Keith Courage be a lesson to all of us. Let Knack be the last Keith Courage.